Today, both Tom and I will show a glimpse of the forest habitat at Lehman Sanctuary. Forests are essential to our way of life, from providing oxygen to lowering carbon emissions to even providing shelter and food for the local wildlife. Through this short documentary, we hope to showcase some of the relationships between many of the plants in this habitat.
Northeastern America represents one of the most populated regions, while still having a large percentage of the land forested. These forests are home to a large variety of trees. In this particular habitat, there is a canopy of trees high up collecting sunlight. This leaves the grand majority of the rest of the area shaded from the sun. The only real intermediate-sized plants are the ferns. The closer one looks at the forest floor, the more life can be seen. There are mosses all over the place and fungi growing on the trees. Signs of animal life can be found from feces to even skeletons on the ground. This video shows a pan of the habitat that we will be discussing today. Many of the factors playing into advantages and disadvantages are due to the nature of the canopy created by the large trees. One of the advantages this creates is a cooler environment. This is beneficial to many of the plants in the forest. The ferns have flagellated sperm, so they operate best when there's a film of water to reproduce. While this is the case, ferns still grow in the areas where there's less canopy cover. This is because they still need a healthy amount of sunlight to properly grow. The only times where the sun isn't blocked by the canopy to reach the ferns is midday, when the sun is directly overhead. This positioning allows the ferns to both reproduce with flagellated sperm and still have sunlight. The moss also benefits from this shade. They have no vascular or root system, which makes them vulnerable to water loss. The canopy's shade reduces temperature, which in turn reduces water loss through transpiration. Another advantage is the abundance of nutrients in the soil. Dead trees are decomposed and add nutrients to the soil for other organisms to benefit from. Animals also benefit from this habitat. Tree roots and other plants offer shelter for animals. In some cases, like squirrels, trees drop seeds for animals to feed on. At this time of year, acorn caps can be found scattered on the ground as a reminder of these animals. A picture of a few of these is shown on the right. While the canopy helps regulate the sunlight in non-shaded areas, it can serve as a disadvantage as well. As shown in the previous video, areas close to the trees or in heavily shaded areas are relatively devoid of life. Growth in most forms is unstimulated due to a lack in sunlight. This reduces the areas that plants can grow in and forces competition in the areas that are unshaded. The cooler conditions can favor some fungi, which can be disease-carrying. This ultimately can be detrimental to the plants in the forest. An example of this is the beefsteak fungi, which is shown on the right. We will go into more detail on this shortly. The trees can also reduce wind through the forest. Many of the trees in the forest use wind to send their seeds far away. Because of the large trees, the wind doesn't carry as far, so the seeds don't either. Many of the plants living in this habitat are adapted for their situation. Trees have races in height to be the tallest. This is in order to get sunlight before the other trees do. They have adapted to essentially try to be the tallest in the forest. Decomposers in the area have adapted to break down the trees when they eventually fall. They are able to process the energy source from them and release nutrients into the environment. Plants that aren't trees racing for sunlight have adapted to function in cooler environments, such as the ferns with their flagellated sperm.
Fistelina hepatica is a common brown rot fungi in forests. Its genus name, Fistelina, refers to the small tubules that release spores on the underside of the fruiting body. Its species name hepatica means liver-like and refers to its flesh-looking body. Its common name, beefsteak fungus, gets its name for the same reason. This fungus is responsible for generating brown rot in white pine trees. It does so by degrading polysaccharides and lignin in the secondary cell wall. Lignin is an integral part in the formation and upkeep of cell walls due to its rigidity. The oxidation of lignin causes the wood to shrink and show a brown discoloration, which is why it is called brown rot. Prolonged exposure to the beefsteak fungus results in the secondary wall swelling up as the lignin degrades, forming cube-shaped cracks that allow less protection and structure of the tree. Although this damages the white pines, brown rot fungi are necessary for this habitat. The degradation of white pines and other trees recycles lignocellulose back into the soil, which maintains soil fertility for new plants to grow. The Pinus strobus, or eastern white pine, is without a doubt the dominant species of this habitat. It is a massive conifer that can grow up to 40 meters and live for about 200 years. Despite its overwhelming presence in the forest, the white pines require a specific set of parameters to grow and regenerate, otherwise they risk dying off in their seedling stage. Their large size means that they require nutrient-rich and well-drained soils. White pines also need a good amount of space for growth and access to light. The soil they prefer also needs to be low in pH, meaning that other plant species surrounding it must also be able to tolerate higher levels of soil acidity. Lack of access to any of these conditions makes it extremely difficult for plant growth and regeneration. They compensate for this by dropping their needles, which don't degrade easily due to the waxy covering, making it difficult for seedlings to sprout. Their expanding branches with these needles also absorb most sunlight, which also prevents certain plants from growing. These pines can benefit endemic plants, however, by regulating the soil temperature with their roots.
There are a number of ferns growing on the forest floor. On this slide is a picture of two kinds of them. The eastern wood fern, or
Dryoptera marginalis,
is an intermediate-sized green fern with spores along the outside edges of the leaf. They are fairly tolerant of the cold, which likely helps them survive longer in the winter months. The Christmas fern, or
Polystichum acrosticoides,
got its name from keeping its sharp green in its leaves through the Christmas season. It's known to grow well in a shady environment such as our forested habitat.
The Polytrichum juniperinum, or juniper haircap moss, is a relatively common perennial moss. It has a distinctive gametophyte that sticks up in the air and has dark green leaves all over to provide a wider surface area for water collection. Dicranum scoparinum was another moss found in this forest habitat. Its leaves curve all to one side, forming its distinctive round shape. This moss also has a pluricellular rhizoids, or root-like structures that aid in water absorption and anchors a plant to the forest floor. The Banzania trilobata is a liverwort that has 3 rows of small leaves and also lacks a true root system. Its gametophytes are fairly large in size and are Y-shaped. These liverworts are commonly found next to decomposed trees. These 3 non-vascular plants are found in abundance on the forest floor of the Lehman Sanctuary. They don't have a true root system and require moisture, shade, and acidic soils, indicating that these conditions are ideal for white pine growth as well.
Along with the eastern white pine, we decided to include a few more of the many species of trees in the forested habitat. The eastern hemlock's scientific name is Tsuga canadensis. It's a shade-tolerant evergreen which is found commonly in the eastern United States. It is one of the many coniferous trees in the area. The yellow birch, or
Betulo alleghaniensis,
is a tall birch tree commonly found in the northeastern United States. The bark on young yellow birch trees can peel to make it relatively easy to recognize.
These decomposing trees are some but of many that were found at the sanctuary. Despite being reduced to nothing but mulch, these trees still benefit the forest habitat greatly. Once degraded, the organic material is taken in by the surrounding plants and utilized for energy. Wood decomposers, like the beefsteak fungus, accelerate this process to sustain the already overwhelming presence of life in this habitat. Lastly, here's a quick video of one of the pines undergoing the decomposition process. Thank you for watching.